Suge Knight. If you grew up listening to hip-hop in the 90s, you knew the name Suge Knight. Marion Suge Knight co-founded Death Row Records and helped launch the careers of Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac Shakur. At its peak, Death Row dominated hip-hop like no other label before or since. But Suge Knight wasn't just a music executive. He had a reputation for violence that followed him everywhere he went. There are stories about him dangling Vanilla Ice off a hotel balcony to get a publishing deal signed. Stories about beatings, intimidation, threats. He was convicted of assault in 1995 and served time. He was shot at the same Las Vegas party where Tupac was killed in 1996. Run-ins with law enforcement were basically a regular Tuesday for this man. For years, the stories piled up. And for years, Knight seemed untouchable. He'd get arrested, post bail, and go right back to business. That all ended on January 29, 2015, in a Compton parking lot. Here's what happened. Near the set of the NWA biopic Straight Outta Compton, Knight pulled his red Ford F-150 Raptor into the parking lot of Tam's Burgers. He ran into CLE Bone Sloan, an actor and anti-violence activist who was consulting on the film. The two men got into an altercation through the driver's side window. Then Knight reversed his truck and knocked Sloan to the ground. But he didn't stop there. He threw the truck into drive, accelerated forward, and ran directly over Sloan. Standing nearby was a 55-year-old businessman named Terry Carter. Carter wasn't involved in the argument at all. He was just standing in the parking lot. And here's the part that makes this even worse. Terry Carter was Suge Knight's friend. He had co-founded Heavyweight Records with Ice Cube. He was not a rival. He was not a threat. He was a friend. Knight's truck struck Carter, killing him from multiple blunt force injuries. Sloan survived, but barely. 2 crushed ankles, severe head injuries. Knight was originally charged with murder and attempted murder. But on September 20th, 2018, after 3 years of legal maneuvering, he pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter. Now here's where California's 3 strikes law turned a bad situation into a catastrophic one. Knight had a prior assault conviction from 1995. So his 11-year manslaughter sentence was automatically doubled to 22 years. Then they added 5 years for a serious felony enhancement. Then another year for the deadly weapon allegation. The truck itself was classified as the weapon. 28 years for a man who was already in his 50s. Knight is currently locked up at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in California. In March 2025, a judge denied his petition to overturn the conviction. His earliest shot at parole is October 2034. He'll be 69 years old. The man who once ran the biggest record label in hip-hop might spend the rest of his life in a cell because he couldn't walk away from a parking lot argument. But Suge Knight at least stuck around to face the consequences. This next musician, he cut off his ankle monitor and ran from the law. And what he did while he was running is one of the most bizarre stories in music history. Tay-K. On July 26, 2016, in Mansfield, Texas, a group of armed men kicked in the door of a house and rushed inside. They were there to rob it. One of them, a kid named Letharian Merritt, was carrying a gun. Sitting inside was a 21-year-old named Ethan Walker. Walker was shot in the stomach while sitting with his hands up. He died. A 17-year-old named Zachary Bellawat took a bullet to the shoulder but survived. The person who organized the whole thing? A 16-year-old rapper named Taymor McIntyre. You know him as Tay-K. Prosecutors laid out exactly how it went down. Tay-K recruited Merritt for the robbery, and according to prosecutors, he knew Merritt was trigger-happy. 3 young women were sent into the house first, pretending they wanted to smoke. Their real job was to scout the place and unlock the front door from the inside. Then the armed crew rushed in. Ethan Walker never had a chance. Tay-K was arrested and charged. A court placed him under house arrest with an ankle monitor while they figured out whether to try him as an adult. And this is where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. On March 27, 2017, Tay-K cut off his ankle monitor and disappeared. For roughly 3 months, while every law enforcement agency in Texas was looking for him, Tay-K was on the run. And during those 3 months, prosecutors say he was involved in another killing. On April 23, 2017, a 23-year-old San Antonio photographer named Mark Anthony Saldivar drove to a Chick-fil-A parking lot. He thought he was meeting someone for a promotional photo shoot. It was a setup. Saldivar was shot and killed in that parking lot. But here's the part that turned this case into a national story. While Tay-K was hiding out in New Jersey, evading U.S. Marshals, he walked into a studio and recorded a song called The Race. The lyrics were about being a fugitive. He was literally rapping about running from the law while running from the law. The music video dropped on June 30, 2017. The same day, U.S. Marshals kicked in a door in New Jersey and arrested him. In the video, he's posing with his own wanted poster, holding it up like a trophy. The Race peaked at number 44 on the Billboard Hot 100 and went platinum. Millions of streams, a bona fide hit, and prosecutors used every bit of it against him. They introduced the song and the video as evidence of his attitude. Zero remorse, zero regret. Just a kid bragging about outrunning the cops while 2 families buried their sons. On July 19, 2019, a Tarrant County jury found Tay-K guilty of murder in Ethan Walker's death. Not capital murder, but murder. He got 55 years plus concurrent sentences of 30 years for aggravated robbery. Then he was transferred to Behar County for the Saldivar case. That trial wrapped up on April 14, 2025. Another murder conviction, another sentence, 80 years. The sentences run concurrently, but under Texas law, Tay-K has to serve at least 30 years before he's even eligible for parole. That puts him at roughly 2047. He'll be 47 years old. He was 16 when it started, 17 when he recorded a platinum hit while wanted for murder. And now he's looking at decades behind bars while that song still racks up streams. Tay-K was 17 when his crimes began. But the next story on this list makes every other case here look tame by comparison. Because this man's crimes didn't span months or years. They spanned decades and continents. Gary Glitter. In the 1970s, Paul Francis Gadd was one of the biggest rock stars in Britain. Performing under the name Gary Glitter, he sold millions of records, packed arenas, and became one of the faces of the glam rock movement. His hit Rock and Roll Part 2 became a stadium anthem that you've probably heard at 100 sporting events. For decades, that was the image, the sequined performer, the glam rock icon. But what was happening behind that image is one of the most disturbing stories in the entire music industry. In November of 1997, Gadd walked into a computer repair shop in Bristol and handed over his laptop to get fixed. The technician opened it up and found something that changed everything. Over 4,000 images of child sexual abuse material. The technician called the police. Gadd was arrested. In November 1999, Bristol Crown Court sentenced him to 4 months in prison. 4 months. For 4,000 images. That sentence would look absurd even by the standards of the time. But what makes it truly pathetic is what happened next, because Gadd treated that conviction like a speed bump. After his release, Gadd fled the United Kingdom. He went to Spain first, then Cuba, then eventually Southeast Asia. Cambodia took him in for a while, but Cambodian authorities expelled him after allegations of sexual abuse surfaced there too. So he moved to Vietnam and set up in a villa in the coastal city of Vung Tau. A convicted sex offender, hopping from country to country, looking for somewhere the law couldn't reach him. It caught up with him anyway. In 2006, Vietnamese authorities arrested him for sexually abusing 2 girls at his villa. The victims were 10 and 11 years old. The judge in that case, Hoang Thanh Tong, said God had harmed children many times in a disgusting and sick manner. He initially faced charges that carried the death penalty, but he was ultimately convicted of a lesser charge and sentenced to 3 years. 3 years. He was deported back to the UK in August of 2008. But the real reckoning was still coming. After the Jimmy Savile scandal broke wide open in the UK, the Metropolitan Police launched a massive investigation called Operation U-Tree. Its mission was to uncover decades of sexual abuse by public figures in the entertainment industry. Gary Glitter was the very first person arrested, October 28, 2012. And what investigators uncovered went back further than anyone expected. On February 5, 2015, Southwark Crown Court convicted him of attempted intercourse with a girl under 10 years old, unlawful sexual intercourse with a girl under 13, and 4 counts of indecent assault. These weren't recent crimes. They dated from 1975 to 1980. He had been doing this for decades before anyone caught on. The judge, Alistair McCruth, told the courtroom it was difficult to overstate the depravity of this dreadful behavior. Gad was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Now you might think that's where this story ends. It doesn't. In February 2023, after serving 8 years, Gad was released on license. He was 80 years old. Surely a man that age, after everything, would just disappear quietly. He lasted 6 weeks. Authorities recalled him to prison after he reportedly tried to access the dark web from his bail hostel. 6 weeks of freedom, and he was already back to his old patterns. Since then, the parole board has rejected his release twice. Once in February 2024, again in June 2025. Both times, the board noted that Gad refuses to participate in rehabilitation programs and continues to deny any sexual interest in children. Even after everything, after 3 countries, after multiple convictions, after decades of evidence, he still won't admit what he is. In June 2024, the High Court ordered him to pay £508,800 in damages to one of his victims. He couldn't pay. He was declared bankrupt in early 2025. His sentence runs until February 2031. He is 81 years old, 3 countries, 3 convictions, victims spanning from the 1970s to the 2000s, and he still won't take responsibility. Gary Glitter's crimes were calculated, systematic, and stretched across the globe. But sometimes the most senseless violence comes from the most trivial arguments. And that brings us to Kingston, Jamaica. Ninjaman. In Jamaican dancehall, few names carry more weight than Ninjaman. Desmond Ballantyne, known as the Don Gorgon, was a legend, a pioneer of the genre, the kind of artist who could silence an entire dancehall crowd just by walking up to the microphone. But on March 16, 2009, in the Olympic Gardens area of Kingston, Ninjaman threw his entire legacy away over something almost impossible to believe. A kitchen argument. According to prosecutors, a dispute broke out over shared kitchen space between Ninjaman's household and a 20-year-old man named Ricardo Johnson, who went by the name Ricky Trooper. Whatever happened in that kitchen, it escalated fast. Ninjaman, along with his son Johnny Ballantyne and an associate named Dennis Clayton, confronted Johnson. Then, hours later, they came back, this time with guns. Johnson tried to run. A witness in protective custody testified that the 3 men chased Johnson through a fence. The witness said Ninjaman himself fired shots before Johnson was hit in the side and killed. He was 20 years old, dead over a kitchen argument. Now here's where this case gets strange. Ninjaman was arrested and charged, but his trial didn't start for 8 years. 17 missed trial dates, 23 court appearances that went nowhere. For 8 years, Ninjaman was out on bail, performing at dance hall events, appearing on stages across Jamaica, living his life as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the family of Ricardo Johnson sat in courtrooms over and over again, watching the case get pushed back, postponed, rescheduled. 8 years of showing up and going home with nothing. His defense team would later argue that these delays actually destroyed evidence that could have helped him. Alibi witnesses moved away. Memories faded. The very system that was supposed to deliver justice may have made a fair trial impossible by dragging its feet for nearly a decade. But in October 2017, Justice Martin Gale had enough. He revoked Ninjaman's bail and ordered the trial to begin immediately. The trial lasted 5 weeks. It was closed to the public because gun charges were involved, and when the 7-member jury finally got the case, they deliberated for 3 hours and 11 minutes. Guilty. November 20th, 2017. Ninjaman, his son, and Clayton were all convicted of murder. At sentencing, Justice Gale looked at Ninjaman and said something worth hearing. "You were given a chance in 1999, and one would have thought that you learnt your lesson. Now you're back before the court for the use of a gun. You are a public figure, and you are expected to set an example." Ninjaman's response? He looked at the judge and said, "Thumbs up, Judge." He's currently at Tower Street Adult Correctional Center in Kingston, serving life with a minimum of 25 years before he can even apply for parole. His appeal has been delayed by tragedy. His original defense attorney, Valerie Naita Robertson, fell ill in October 2024 and passed away in February 2025. The appeal is now scheduled for March 23, 2026. If it fails, Ninjaman won't be eligible for parole until December 2042. He'll be 76. Ninjaman is still fighting for his freedom from inside Tower Street, but his fellow dancehall artist, Vybz Kartel, already got his day in the appeals court. And what happened next shocked everyone who followed the case. Vybz Kartel. Vybz Kartel is the biggest name in dancehall, period. Adidja Palmer built a musical empire that stretched far beyond Jamaica. Millions of fans, hundreds of tracks, the kind of influence where other artists measured themselves against him. But on August 16, 2011, at Kartel's home in the Havendale area of Kingston, a 27-year-old associate named Clive Williams walked through the front door. People called him Lizard. He never walked out. According to prosecutors, Williams had been given 2 unlicensed firearms for safekeeping. When he couldn't return them, things went bad. Testimony from the 65-day trial described Williams being beaten to death inside Kartel's home. But the most damning evidence didn't come from witness testimony. It came from Kartel's own phone. Text messages recovered by investigators painted a horrifying picture. Messages between Kartel and associates that referenced chopping up a body, that described Williams as mincemeat, and that bragged about how the body would never be found. Prosecutors read these messages aloud in court, and the courtroom went silent. The trial lasted 65 days. It was the longest criminal proceeding in Jamaican history. 65 days of testimony, evidence, and legal arguments. The whole country was watching. And then there's this detail. Clive Williams's body was never found. The house where he was allegedly killed, it burned down just days later. The body was gone, the house was gone, but those text messages survived. And so did the witness testimony. A 10-to-1 jury majority found Kartel guilty. Justice Lennox Campbell sentenced him to life in prison with 35 years before parole eligibility. That was later reduced to 32.5 years on appeal. 3 co-defendants, including an artist named Sean Storm Campbell, got similar sentences. For 13 years, Vybz Kartel sat in prison. His music kept dropping, his fans kept streaming, but he was locked up, seemingly for good. Then the whole thing fell apart. And it fell apart because of one juror. During the trial on the very last day, it was discovered that a juror named Livingston Kane had been offering 500,000 Jamaican dollars to other jurors in exchange for not guilty verdicts. That's roughly 3,200 US dollars. A straight-up bribe right there in the jury room. When the judge found out, he had a choice. Declare a mistrial and start over, or keep going with a compromised jury. He chose to keep going. That decision haunted the case for over a decade. In February 2024, the UK Privy Council, which serves as Jamaica's final court of appeal, heard arguments about the juror misconduct. On March 14, 2024, they delivered their ruling. Allowing that juror to remain on the panel was, in their words, fatal to the safety of the convictions. Fatal, not questionable, not concerning. Fatal. The Jamaica Court of Appeal then had to decide whether to order a brand new trial. On July 31, 2024, they ruled unanimously against a retrial. 13 years had passed. Key witnesses were unavailable. Cartel himself was battling Graves' disease and his health was declining. That evening, Vybz Kartel walked out of prison a free man. Not because a court said he was innocent, not because the evidence was thrown out. Because one juror took a bribe, and the judge at the time didn't stop the trial when he should have. Clive Lizard Williams is still missing. His body has never been recovered. His family never got closure. And the man convicted of his murder is free because the system failed at the most basic level. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. Now let's go to our next case. Austin Jones, the YouTube predator. Austin Jones had it all figured out. He'd record himself singing a cappella covers of pop-punk songs, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, My Chemical Romance. The editing was tight. His voice was polished. By 2017, he had 540,000 subscribers and over 20 million views. His audience was mostly teenage girls, and he knew it. What those girls didn't know was that Austin Jones wasn't just a musician building a fan base. He was systematically identifying targets. Between August 2016 and May 2017, Jones used Facebook Messenger and iMessage to contact girls he'd met at concerts or through his channel. The pattern was always the same. First, he'd build trust, make them feel special, tell them they could be his biggest fans. Then came the request. He'd tell them to record videos of themselves, explicit videos. But here's the calculated part. He'd make them state their names and ages at the beginning. He'd promise them modeling opportunities, Instagram followers, a chance to meet him. None of it was real. In 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children started receiving reports from Facebook. Someone was soliciting sexually explicit videos from minors. The trail led straight to Austin Jones. On June 12, 2017, Homeland Security Investigations agents executed a search warrant at Jones's home in Bloomingdale, Illinois. They arrested him at O'Hare International Airport. Here's where it gets even worse. Jones waived his Miranda rights. He confessed on video. He admitted that he'd solicited explicit material from at least 6 girls aged 14 and 15. But that wasn't all. He told investigators he'd attempted to entice approximately 30 additional minors. 30. But this wasn't Jones's first brush with consequences. In May 2015, a 15-year-old girl had started a Change.org petition demanding his removal from Van's Warped Tour. She accused him of asking underage fans for explicit videos. Jones withdrew from the tour. He posted an apology video admitting to requesting videos from fans, but claimed, quote, "Nothing ever went further." That was a lie. On February 1, 2019, Jones pleaded guilty to 1 count of receipt of child pornography in federal court. The charge carried a minimum sentence of 5 years and a maximum of 20. U.S. District Judge John Z. Lee sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison, plus 8 years of supervised release. During sentencing, Judge Lee said Jones had preyed upon the insecurities of his young victims. He'd weaponized his celebrity status to manipulate children into creating adult films. Today, Austin Jones is incarcerated at FCI Loretto in Pennsylvania. His expected release date is December 31st, 2027. His YouTube channel has been terminated. His music has been scrubbed from streaming platforms. The 540,000 subscribers who once watched his a cappella covers now know the truth about what their favorite YouTuber was really doing behind the camera. But Jones's 10-year sentence is nothing compared to what comes next. R. Kelly. For nearly 30 years, Robert Sylvester Kelly was one of the biggest names in R&B. I Believe I Can Fly, Ignition, Bump and Grind. He wrote and produced for Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, and Celine Dion. He won 3 Grammy Awards and sold 75 million records worldwide. And for nearly 30 years, he was sexually abusing women and underage girls. Let's go back to 1994. 27-year-old R. Kelly secretly married 15-year-old singer Aaliyah in Rosemont, Illinois. The marriage certificate falsely listed Aaliyah as 18 years old. Former tour manager Demetrius Smith later testified under oath that he'd helped obtain a falsified ID so the marriage could happen. The marriage was annulled by Aaliyah's family in February 1995. Aaliyah died in a plane crash in 2001. She never publicly discussed what happened during that marriage. But the lawsuits started piling up. Tiffany Hawkins filed suit in 1996, alleging Kelly had sexual relations with her beginning when she was 15. She settled for $250,000. In December 2000, the Chicago Sun-Times reported that police were investigating Kelly for sexual misconduct with minors. Then, in February 2002, the Sun-Times received an anonymous videotape. The tape allegedly showed Kelly engaging in sexual acts with an underage girl. Kelly was indicted in June 2002 on 21 counts of child-adult films. The trial lasted 6 years. In June 2008, he was acquitted on all 14 counts. The reason? The alleged victim, his goddaughter, refused to testify against him. But in January 2019, everything changed. Lifetime aired Surviving R. Kelly, a 6-part documentary featuring testimony from victims, former employees, and family members. 2 million people watched. The National Sexual Assault Hotline saw a 27% increase in calls. RCA Records dropped Kelly. Radio stations stopped playing his music. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx opened a new investigation. In July 2019, federal prosecutors in New York and Chicago filed charges. This time, the charges included racketeering, sex trafficking, and child-adult film production. The difference between 2008 and 2019? This time, the victims were ready to testify. Kelly's New York federal trial began on August 18, 2021. Prosecutors argued that Kelly had run a criminal enterprise for decades, an organized operation to recruit, groom, and sexually exploit women and underage girls. Over 6 weeks, more than 45 witnesses testified. 10 of them were victims who detailed patterns of abuse spanning decades. Jerhonda Pace testified that Kelly had directed her to dress like a Girl Scout when she was 16. She said he'd choked her until she passed out. Faith Rogers testified that Kelly had knowingly infected her with a sexually transmitted disease, then locked her in rooms as punishment. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA on victims' clothing, text messages with explicit demands, audio recordings of Kelly ordering degrading acts, video footage showing physical abuse. On September 27, 2021, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Guilty on all 9 counts. 1 count of racketeering, 8 counts of violating the Mann Act, which prohibits sex trafficking across state lines, The jury found the government had proved 12 of 14 underlying racketeering acts, including sexual exploitation, kidnapping, and bribery. But prosecutors weren't done. In the Chicago federal trial that followed, Kelly's goddaughter, now 37 years old, finally testified. She confirmed she was 14 years old in the 2002 video that had led to his acquittal 19 years earlier. On June 29, 2022, U.S. District Judge Ann M. Donnelly sentenced Kelly to 30 years in federal prison for the New York convictions. On February 23, 2023, Judge Harry D. Leinenweber added 20 years in the Chicago case. 19 of those years would run concurrently with the New York sentence. R. Kelly's total effective sentence is 31 years in federal prison. Today, Kelly is incarcerated at FCI Butner Medium 1 in North Carolina. His expected release date is December 21, 2045. He'll be 78 years old. In February 2025, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld his 30-year sentence. The Supreme Court declined to hear his appeal in October 2024. 3 decades of abuse, dozens of victims, a criminal enterprise built on manipulation, coercion, and violence. And it took a documentary to finally bring him down. But if you think R. Kelly's crimes represent the worst of what we're covering today, the next case will prove you wrong. Ian Watkins. Warning: the following case contains details of crimes against children that some viewers may find extremely disturbing. Lost Prophets was one of Britain's biggest rock bands. Formed in 1997 in Wales, they climbed from small clubs to arena tours. Their 2006 album, Liberation Transmission, hit #1 in the UK. Last Train Home topped Billboard's Alternative Songs chart. They won multiple Kerrang! Awards. Ian Watkins was the frontman, charismatic, energetic, and beloved by fans. He was also a predator, committing crimes so severe that when he was finally convicted, the sentencing judge said they plumbed new depths of depravity. Here's what makes this case even more disturbing. Between December 2008 and 2012, 6 different people reported Ian Watkins to South Wales police. 6 people. His ex-girlfriend, Joanne Manjadzilix, was video interviewed by police in March 2009. She showed them a text message from Watkins expressing his desire to harm children. An Australian woman reported an assault on her child in 2010. 4 more reports came in over the next 2 years. Police deemed the accusers not credible. They showed what an independent investigation would later call conscious or unconscious bias. Officers were reluctant, the report found, to take action that would draw huge publicity regarding a celebrity. So Ian Watkins kept performing, kept touring, kept committing crimes. He was caught by accident. On September 21, 2012, police executed an unrelated drugs warrant at his home in Pontypridd. They seized computers and storage devices. When forensic analysts examined the data, they found something horrifying. 27 terabytes of data, 4 or 5 times the size of South Wales Police's entire database. His laptop password was discovered to be iFookKids. The contents showed extensive evidence of sexual abuse. Watkins was formally charged on December 19, 2012. His final performance with Lost Prophets had occurred just weeks earlier, on November 14th. His trial began at Cardiff Crown Court on November 25, 2013. Watkins initially denied all charges, but on the second day of trial, just before the jury was sworn in, he changed his plea. Guilty on 13 counts, including attempted grooming of a child under 13, conspiracy to groom a child, and assault of a child under 13. The victims included an 11-month-old baby. Evidence presented at trial showed Watkins had sent text messages to one of the mothers involved, stating, "If you belong to me, so does your baby." He had given substances to children and filmed his abuse. He had used encrypted messaging to coordinate his crimes with two mothers who offered access to their own children. Those two co-defendants received sentences of 14 and 17 years. On December 18, 2013, Judge John Royce sentenced Ian Watkins to 29 years imprisonment, plus 6 years extended license. In his sentencing remarks, Judge Royce stated, "Those who have appeared in these courts at the bar or on the bench over many years see and hear a large number of horrific cases. This case, however, breaks new ground." After pleading guilty, Watkins made a recorded phone call from prison. He referred to his offenses as mega lols. On October 1, 2013, Lost Prophets officially disbanded. The remaining band members released a statement saying they were heartbroken, angry, and disgusted, and had never imagined him capable of behavior of the type he has now admitted. Their entire catalog was removed from most streaming platforms. Radio stations stopped playing their music. Retailers pulled their albums from shelves. 3.5 million albums sold. All of it now associated with one of the worst child abusers in British criminal history. Ian Watkins was incarcerated at HM Prison Wakefield, a maximum security facility that houses some of Britain's most dangerous criminals. On October 11, 2025, Watkins was stabbed to death by fellow inmates. He was 48 years old. Two inmates, Rashid Goodell and Samuel Dodsworth, have been charged with murder. Their trial is scheduled for May 2026. The Independent Police Complaints Commission investigation revealed that if officers had properly followed up on any of the 6 reports made between 2008 and 2012, Ian Watkins could have been stopped years earlier. How many children could have been protected if police had taken those reports seriously? We'll never know. Phil Spector, the genius who killed. Phil Spector revolutionized popular music. The producer behind Be My Baby, You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin', an Unchained Melody, invented the wall of sound production technique that defined 1960s pop music. He produced albums for the Beatles, John Lennon, and George Harrison, and he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989. But Phil Spector had another legacy, a pattern of threatening women with firearms that spanned decades. And on February 3, 2003, that pattern ended in murder. 40-year-old actress Lana Clarkson was working as a hostess at the House of Blues on Sunset Strip when Phil Spector walked in. Clarkson was known for B-movie roles in Barbarian Queen and Death Stalker. Like many actresses in Los Angeles, she took hostess work between auditions. Spector invited her back to his Alhambra mansion for a drink. She initially refused, then agreed, telling a co-worker she'd be back soon. She never came back. Spector's driver, Adriano de Souza, waited outside the mansion. Around 5 a.m., he heard a sound, a single gunshot. Moments later, Phil Spector emerged from the house holding a gun. His hands were covered in blood. According to de Souza's testimony, Spector said, "I think I killed somebody." Police arrived to find Lana Clarkson dead in the foyer. A single gunshot wound through her mouth, her spine severed. A Colt Cobra revolver, Spector's gun, lay near her feet. Her teeth were scattered across the carpet. When officers asked Spector to take his hands out of his pockets, he refused. They tasered him. Spector's first trial began in March 2007. His defense team argued that Clarkson had committed suicide, that she was depressed about her career and had put Spector's gun in her own mouth. On September 26, 2007, the jury deadlocked. 10 jurors voted guilty. 2 voted not guilty, mistrial. The second trial began on October 20, 2008. This time, prosecutors brought in 5 women who'd had prior encounters with Phil Spector. 5 women who testified about a pattern of behavior. Dorothy Melvin, Joan Rivers' manager, testified that Spector had pointed a gun at her and demanded she undress. When she refused, he chased her with a shotgun. Diane Ogden testified that Spector put a rifle to her face, threatened to blow her brains out, and attempted to rape her at gunpoint. Melissa Grosvenor testified that Spector pulled a gun when she said she wanted to leave his house. Stephanie Jennings testified that Spector brandished a gun to keep her confined in a hotel room. Deborah Strand testified that Spector put a gun to her cheek at a party. 5 women, 5 incidents. The same pattern over and over. When women tried to leave Phil Spector, he pulled a gun. Forensic evidence backed up the prosecution's case. Blood spatter was found on Spector's white dinner jacket, in a pattern consistent with being near a gunshot wound. Severe bruising was found on Lana Clarkson's tongue. Forensic pathologist Dr. Louis Pena testified this indicated the gun had been forced into her mouth. On April 13, 2009, after 30 hours of deliberation over 7 days, the jury reached a verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder, Phil Spector was immediately taken into custody. On May 29, 2009, Judge Larry Paul Fidler sentenced Spector to 19 years to life, 15 years for murder, plus 4 years for firearm use. Judge Fidler cited Spector's pattern of violence and noted he'd had previous firearms convictions in the 1970s. Spector's health deteriorated rapidly in prison. He lost the ability to speak due to laryngeal papillomatosis and was transferred to California Healthcare Facility in Stockton. In December 2020, Phil Spector contracted COVID-19. On January 16, 2021, Phil Spector died from COVID-19 complications at age 81. He'd served approximately 12 years of his sentence. Lana Clarkson was 40 years old when she died. She'd gone to Spector's mansion believing she was having one drink with a music legend before going home. Instead, she became another victim in a decades-long pattern of violence that Hollywood had ignored for far too long. Our next case brings us to a shooting that happened in Hollywood Hills, to a trial that became a media spectacle. Tory Lanez, the Hollywood Hills shooting. In the early morning hours of July 12, 2020, an argument erupted in an SUV driving through the Hollywood Hills. The 3 people in that vehicle had just left a pool party at Kylie Jenner's house. Canadian rapper Tory Lanez, born Daystar Peterson. Grammy-winning rapper Megan Thee Stallion, born Megan Pete. And Megan's assistant at the time, Kelsey Harris. What happened in the next 60 seconds would lead to a 3-year legal battle, a social media harassment campaign, and a 10-year prison sentence. Megan Thee Stallion was at the peak of her career. Savage had just hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. She'd won her first Grammy. She had endorsement deals with major brands. According to testimony at trial, the argument in the SUV got heated. Megan asked to be let out of the vehicle. She got out and started walking away. That's when Tory Lanez shouted from the SUV, "Dance, bitch!" He fired a 9mm semi-automatic handgun at the back of her feet. Megan Thee Stallion was shot in both feet. She required surgery to remove bullet fragments. When police stopped the SUV, officers drew their weapons. Megan initially told them she'd stepped on glass. She later explained that she was terrified. She'd seen too many instances of police violence against black people. She didn't want anyone to get shot by police during the traffic stop. 3 weeks later, on August 20th, 2020, Megan went on Instagram Live and named Tory Lanez as the shooter. On October 8th, 2020, Lanez was formally charged with assault with a semi-automatic firearm, carrying a loaded unregistered firearm, and discharging a firearm with gross negligence. But instead of staying quiet and letting his lawyers handle it, Tory Lanez went on a harassment campaign. He released an album called Daystar, filled with lyrics claiming his innocence and attacking Megan's credibility. In July 2021, he violated a court-ordered 100-yard protective order by appearing on stage at Rolling Loud Miami moments after Megan performed. His bail increased from $190,000 to $250,000. In February 2022, He tweeted comments about DNA evidence in the case, violating another court order. His bail increased again to $350,000. He was briefly jailed. After an alleged assault on singer August Alsina in November 2022, Lanez was placed under house arrest. The trial finally began on December 5, 2022, in Los Angeles Superior Court. Megan Thee Stallion testified for approximately 3 hours. She recounted the shooting in detail. She described how Lanez had offered her $1 million not to say anything. She testified that Lanez begged her not to go to the police because he was on probation for a previous weapons charge. The most damning evidence came from a text message at 4:27 a.m. on July 12, 2020. Just minutes after the shooting, Kelsey Harris sent a text to Megan's bodyguard, "Help, Tory shot Meg, 911." 4 words that proved everything. Prosecutors also played Kelsey Harris's 80-minute recorded interview for the jury. In that interview, she corroborated that Tory Lanez was the shooter. On December 23, 2022, after deliberating for several days, the jury reached a verdict. Guilty on all 3 felony counts. Tory Lanez's father disrupted the courtroom, shouting that prosecutors were evil and wicked before being physically removed. On August 8, 2023, Judge David Hereford sentenced Tory Lanez to 10 years in state prison. Megan's victim impact statement, read by prosecutors, said, "He not only shot me, he made a mockery of my trauma." She was granted a restraining order against Lanez through 2030, but Tory Lanez's story didn't end with sentencing. On May 12, 2025, Lanez was stabbed 14 times by a fellow inmate at California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi. He suffered collapsed lungs and wounds to his back, torso, head, and face. He was transferred to California Men's Colony near San Luis Obispo, where he remains incarcerated today. In November 2025, a 3-judge appeals panel affirmed his conviction. His attorney has announced plans to appeal to the California Supreme Court. Tory Lanez is currently eligible for parole in late 2029, though there's no guarantee he'll be released. Meanwhile, Megan Thee Stallion has continued her career. She's spoken openly about the trauma of being shot and then having to defend herself against a sustained campaign of harassment and disbelief. The Tory Lanez case shows that even with clear evidence, even with text messages saying Tory shot Meg, even with witnesses and forensic proof, it still took 3 years to get a conviction. 3 years of harassment, 3 years of conspiracy theories, 3 years of victim blaming on social media. Justice eventually came. But the question remains, why did it take so long? 10 musicians, 10 convictions. For the families, no verdict will ever be enough. Thanks for watching. Click here if you don't want to miss out on our next video.